Before Henry A. Kissinger begins his tribute, it is worth pausing to recognize the remarkable convergence of two minds that helped define the strategic thinking of their era. One came from the heart of the Western world order, Kissinger, a scholar-turned-statesman who, as U.S. Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, steered American foreign policy through the most delicate stages of the Cold War. The other rose from a tiny, vulnerable island in Southeast Asia, Lee Kuan Yew, the founding Prime Minister of Singapore, who built a nation out of improbable beginnings and secured it a lasting place among the most prosperous societies on Earth. Kissinger's career was marked by the belief that history, culture, and national interest must be weighed together in the practice of diplomacy. His counsel was sought by presidents and prime ministers alike, and his influence extended far beyond Washington. Lee's path, though forged in a vastly different setting, was no less strategic. Leading Singapore from 1959 to 1990, he married vision with discipline, implementing policies that blended meritocracy, pragmatism, and a steadfast commitment to stability. The two men met as equals in intellect and candor. Kissinger valued Lee's unsentimental view of global power shifts, particularly in Asia, where the rise of China and the role of the United States demanded constant recalibration. Lee, in turn, saw in Kissinger a rare grasp of how historical forces shape both great powers and small states. In the pages that follow, Kissinger places Lee's achievements in the broader sweep of 20th century transformation, from the wave of decolonization to the new realities of globalization. His foreword is more than an appraisal. It is a recognition that Lee's legacy offers enduring lessons on leadership, resilience, and the art of navigating between giants. It is in this spirit that Kissinger begins his own words. In the second half of the 20th century, the emergence of scores of new states has made international politics and economics truly global for the first time in history. At the same time, technology has made it possible for nearly every country to participate in events in every part of the world as they occur. Unfortunately, the explosion in information has not been accompanied by a similar increase in knowledge. The continents interact, but they do not necessarily understand each other. The uniformity of technology is accompanied by an implicit assumption that politics and even cultures will become homogenized. Especially the long-established nations of the West have fallen, prey to the temptation of ignoring history and judging every new state by the Parthian criteria of their own civilizations. It is often overlooked that the institutions of the West did not spring full-blown from the brow of contemporaries, but evolved over centuries, which shaped frontiers and defined legitimacy, constitutional provisions, and basic values. But history does matter. The institutions of the West developed gradually, while those of most new states were put into place in elaborated form immediately. In the West, a civil society evolved side by side with the maturation of the modern state. This made possible the growth of representative institutions which confined the state's power to those matters which society could not deal with by its own arrangements. Political conflicts were moderated by overriding purposes. Many post-colonial states have no comparable history. Tasks which in the West were accomplished over centuries must be completed in a decade or two, and under much more complex circumstances, where the common national experience is colonial rule, especially when the state comprises diverse ethnic groups. Political opposition is often considered an assault on the political validity of the state rather than of a particular government. Singapore is a case in point, as the main British naval base in the Far East had neither prospect nor aspiration for nationhood until the collapse of European power in the aftermath of the Second World War redrew the political map of Southeast Asia. In the first wave of decolonization, Singapore was made part of. Malaya, until its largely Chinese population, proved too daunting for a state. Attempting to define its national identity by a Malay majority, Malaya extruded. Singapore, because it was not yet ready to cope with so large a Chinese population, or, less charitably, to teach Singapore the habits of dependence if it was forced back into what later became the Malaysian Federation. But history shows that normally prudent ordinary calculations can be overturned by extraordinary personalities. In the case of Lee Kuan Yew, the father of Singapore's emergence as a national state, the ancient argument, whether circumstance or personality shapes events, is settled in favor of the latter. Circumstances could not have been less favorable. located on a sandbar. With nary a natural resource, Singapore had in the 1950s a polyglot population of slightly over 1 million, today over 3 million, of which 75.4% was Chinese, 13.6% Malay, and 8.6% Indian. It adjoined in the south, with Indonesia with a population of over 100 million, now nearly double that, and in the north with Malaya, later Malaysia, with a population of 6.28 million. By far the smallest country in Southeast Asia, Singapore seemed destined to become a client state of more powerful neighbors, if indeed it could preserve its independence at all. Lee Kuan Yew thought otherwise. Every great achievement is a dream before it becomes reality, and his vision was of a state that would not simply survive but prevail by excelling. Superior intelligence, discipline, and ingenuity would substitute for resources. Lee Kuan Yew summoned his compatriots to a duty they had never previously perceived, first to clean up their city, then to dedicate it to overcome the initial hostility of their neighbors and their own. Ethnic divisions by superior performance. The Singapore of today is his testament. Annual per capita income has grown from less than $1,000 at the time of independence to nearly $30,000 today. It is the high-tech leader of Southeast Asia, the commercial entrepot, the scientific center. Singapore plays a major role in the politics and economics of Southeast Asia and beyond. This volume is Lee Kuan Yew's account of his extraordinary achievement. He navigated this passage by understanding not only the requirements of his own society, but the needs and motives of his neighbors. A thoughtful discussion of Indonesia and the fall of its president Suharto is matched by Lee Kuan Yew's account of his encounters with China and its leaders. His narrative of Singapore's abortive venture into creating a satellite city in Suzhou is particularly instructive on the challenge of melding the market economics of even so friendly an interlocutor as Singapore with the political and social realities of a China midway between Mao and reform. Lee Kuan Yew would not be true to himself were he less than frank about his analysis of the difference between the individualism of the West and the priority for social cohesion in countries such as his and in much of the rest of Asia. He does not ask us to change our patterns, only to refrain from imposing them on societies with different histories and necessities. These views have subjected Lee Kuan Yew to considerable criticism in the West. Those of us who prize our values while understanding the complexities of a new country and a different culture are prepared to leave it to history to pass judgment as to whether there were other options available to him. But for a generation, every American leader who has dealt with Lee Kuan Yew has benefited from the fact that on international issues he has identified the future of his country with the fate of the democracies. And he has done so not passively, but by making a seminal political contribution to the struggles of our time. If you're interested in learning more about Lee Kuan Yew, in his own words and through the perspectives of others, let us know in the comments. You can also support us on Patreon, link below, and become a channel member. Thank you.